The first beam that cracked over his head made everyone online laugh. A neighbor had filmed Miguel stepping into the hallway of the house he had just bought, and the shift in the ceiling had sent a puff of dust straight into his face. The clip went around the neighborhood group chat before he even swept the floor. He tried to ignore it and kept tearing down drywall because the bank had already transferred the loan and his savings were locked in this Houston foreclosure on a street no one bragged about. He had bought the place cheap after months of small repair jobs and 1 year of thinking he would never get ahead. The listing said handyman special, which usually meant termites or mold. Instead, the house smelled like dead air and old computers. The previous owner was some tech guy who had defaulted and vanished. The agent only shrugged. The yard was a mess and the floors felt uneven, but Miguel saw enough potential to gamble. The first small win came when he pulled down a bedroom wall panel and found that someone had tiled over perfectly good hardwood decades earlier. Then a setback hit when a rotted section under the hallway floor made his drill sink almost 3 inches too far. He worked with a hammer in one hand and his phone in the other, checking city permit rules. While knocking around the narrow hallway, he noticed a hollow sound behind one part of the wall that should have been solid. He checked the floor plan he had downloaded. The measurements were off by a foot. Something had been boxed in. He cut a careful hole and hit cold metal. He opened the space wider and found a long metal container wedged between studs that had been reinforced from the inside. He tugged and the wall quivered. The container would not budge. He was still glaring at it when someone knocked on the open front door. It was a man from the courthouse auction who had bid against him. The guy smiled and said he wanted to buy the property as is. Cash. Today. Miguel said he would think about it, and the guy glanced toward the hallway before leaving a card. That was enough to make Miguel drag the reciprocating saw back to the narrow space. The metal box shifted, but the floor groaned in warning. He cut a brace from a leftover stud and wedged it under the joist. On the next pull, the box ripped free and slammed onto the soft floor. A chunk of ceiling dust dropped over his head as if the house were scolding him. Dragging the box out of the hallway proved harder than finding it. The thing weighed as much as a car battery. The neighbor across the street leaned over her fence with her phone ready. She said that the previous owner had been some crypto-obsessive who had agents visiting at dawn. She added that she hoped Miguel knew what he was doing because the last guy sure did not. Miguel grunted and told her he had everything under control, which was a lie even he did not buy. He tried to pull the box into the kitchen, but the floor under his boots bowed again. The rot had spread farther than he thought. He grabbed a sheet of plywood from the truck and laid it flat as a temporary bridge. He slid the box inch by inch until it rested near the ripped-out sink cabinet. His shoulders burned. Small victory. Then another obstacle. The latches on the box were rusted shut. He sprayed them with lubricant and let it sit. Outside, the same investor truck rolled by slowly like a shark smelling something in the water. Miguel felt watched. The latches still refused to open. He took pliers and a flat bar and worked them with steady pressure. His hand slipped and skinned his knuckles on the edge, which stung enough to make him swear under his breath. Another try and the first latch clicked. The second resisted, so he wedged the bar under the lip and put all his weight on it until it snapped upward with a noise that made him look at the ceiling again. Too loud. If an inspector passed by, he would be shut down. He held still and waited for the street to quiet. No one came. He lifted the lid and looked inside. The contents looked boring at first. 2 hard drives sealed in anti-static bags. 1 cheap flash drive with a faded sticker. Several laminated cards with big black squares that he recognized as QR codes. At the bottom of the box, a thin plastic sleeve held a printed sheet. No cash. No jewelry. No envelope with a confession or anything dramatic. Just cold tech. He felt stupid for expecting more and almost closed the lid right away. But the laminated cards had BTC written in marker. Bitcoin. His cousin bragged about crypto every holiday. Miguel held 1 card near the window for better light. A long address full of characters sat under the QR code. He downloaded a blockchain viewer on his phone and manually typed the address. His hands were dusty and he mistyped twice. When the app loaded the balance, he stared. He closed the app, then reopened it, then checked again. The number sat there like a weight on his chest. A pile of digital money untouched for years. The sheet in the sleeve had the name seed, TXT written on it. Under it 12 simple English words forming a phrase. He had read online that phrases like that could unlock wallets. He felt a sharp tension in his neck. If this phrase matched the card address, he had access to something that did not belong to him. But it had been hidden inside property now legally his. The conflict twisted in his stomach. He carried everything to his truck. He drove to an electronics repair shop where he had done drywall work for the owner named Samir. The shop buzzed with fans and smelled of old solder. Miguel placed the drives on the counter. Samir asked if they were personal or business. Miguel said they came with a house he was renovating and he needed to know if anything on them was readable. Samir said he would check. He reminded Miguel that if the drives contained anything obviously illegal, he would have to report it. Miguel nodded stiffly. Walking back to his truck, he kept glancing in the rearview mirror. The courthouse bidder truck passed again and slowed at the corner as if counting the minutes he stayed inside the shop. At home later, he searched through crypto forums to understand seed phrases. He found warnings that anyone holding such a phrase could drain a wallet completely. His pulse thumped hard. He tried to sleep, but every time he closed his eyes, he imagined knocking on doors from agencies he had only seen on TV. The next afternoon, Samir called and said the drives were mostly corrupted junk. But the flash drive held a single file with the same 12-word phrase. That meant the setup was intentional and the flash drive matched the paper. Miguel returned to the shop. Samir had set up an offline laptop. No Wi-Fi, no cable. He said it was safer to test wallet recovery offline. Miguel read the words aloud while Samir typed them. The software asked for an optional passphrase. The paper sheet had a handwritten hint. The street where it started. Miguel thought maybe the tech owner had used the name of his first address in Houston. He searched public records and found an old apartment on Westheimer Road. He tried that. No luck. Then he tried the cross street listed on the foreclosure file. On the third attempt, the program accepted the phrase. A list of addresses appeared with balances. One matched the laminated card. The balance matched the viewer. Miguel felt lightheaded. Samir leaned back with wide eyes. Miguel asked Samir to help check if the wallets showed up in any news about hacks or stolen accounts. They searched public databases from the shop computer. Nothing obvious. Still, he knew he needed legal advice. Samir gave him a contact for a tax attorney named Harris who worked with crypto clients. Miguel left the shop with the box under his arm again. Outside, he saw the same courthouse bidder leaning on the hood of his truck, pretending to text. Miguel walked straight past him without slowing. Harris listened the next morning in a small office with faded blue walls. Miguel explained how he found the hardware inside the wall of a foreclosed house he now owned. Harris researched the previous owner. No criminal record. Involved in a startup that dissolved. Missing after a boating accident. No spouse. No children. Parents deceased. One surviving sister in Arizona. Harris said legally the digital assets likely remained part of the estate, but the house foreclosure did not automatically transfer such private property unless explicitly listed. She said the cleanest path was to contact the sister instead of risking being accused of concealment later. Miguel felt sweat on his palms. Choosing the honest path might cost him everything he had just discovered. He left the office with a phone number and a sense that every direction was dangerous. The sister named Elena agreed to meet in El Paso on her day off. They sat inside a quiet coffee shop near the highway. She wore hospital scrubs and looked exhausted. Miguel placed the metal box between them and explained the situation plainly. He did not dramatize. He said he had invested his own money into renovating the house and recovering the data, and he did not want conflict. He wanted fairness and clarity. Elena listened closely. She asked what he had found, why the wallet had been untouched for years, and what would happen if her brother appeared alive. Miguel answered everything honestly, including his doubts. She had a steady calm that made him feel less defensive. She said she had known her brother was involved in risky tech ventures and had always expected loose ends. They called Harris from the table. Harris proposed creating a trust controlled by her firm. The wallet funds would be documented and divided on paper. One portion for Elena as legal heir. One portion for Miguel as finder and for his renovation costs. A third portion would sit untouched for 2 decades to protect against any legitimate claim from potential partners or the owner himself if he returned. Every step would be declared for tax purposes. No shortcuts. Elena liked the balance of fairness and caution. She signed the initial papers with a notary who came to the coffee shop for a fee. Miguel felt the weight in his chest loosen a little for the first time since opening the box. They shook hands with tired smiles. As they walked to their cars, a strong wind blew dust across the lot. Miguel looked around half expecting the courthouse bidder to appear behind a vehicle. No one was there. He drove back to Houston with the metal box on the seat beside him scored with rust and scratches and heavy with nothing at all since the contents had been moved to safer hands. Yet it felt heavier than when he had found it. The house on Hackberry Street slowly turned into something livable. Miguel replaced the wiring with proper permits. He sanded the hardwood floors until they shone faintly in the late afternoon light. He installed new cabinets with soft close hinges that made him feel like a real craftsman for the first time in years. Neighbors who had laughed at his gamble now stopped by to ask if he could look at their leaky sinks or their broken gates. He took some jobs. He skipped the ones that smelled like trouble. The trust money began moving in small legal steps. Enough to clear his debts. Enough to let him buy a reliable truck instead of the one that died at every red light. He did not brag. He did not post anything online. The story leaked anyway. A local crypto blogger pieced together the rumor of a hidden stash found during renovation. Miguel refused interviews. He did not want cameras near his face or his street. One evening he walked through the hallway where he had first heard the hollow sound. The new wall looked smooth and plain as if nothing unusual had ever happened there. He imagined the tech owner installing the false section with careful hands, hiding the drives behind the studs with a plan that never reached its end. Miguel felt no triumph. Only a steady respect for how ordinary a life could look right before something unexpected washed through it. He kept the empty metal box on a shelf in his small office. Not as a trophy. More as a reminder that hidden value rarely announces itself with bright lights. Sometimes it sits in a wall waiting for someone tired and dusty to strike the right spot. The house eventually sold to a young couple who wanted a starter home. Miguel handed them the keys and wished them luck. What he carried out of the whole ordeal was quieter than wealth. It was the knowledge that the biggest risk he had ever taken had come wrapped in drywall dust and uncertainty. It taught him to trust careful work and honest choices even when they felt like losing. Now he steps into every new job with a steadier breath. Walls come down. Hidden things appear. Most are junk. Some change lives. He just keeps building with the same hands that pulled a heavy box out of a hollow wall on a day when the neighborhood laughed and luck finally stopped looking the other way.